नमस्सर्वेभ्यः ऐऐटि संस्थायां संस्कृतसमितेः अथ च सन्त राजेन्द्रसिंह महाराज चेर् इत्यनयोः आश्रये प्रचाल्यमानं प्रवचनं मुद्राराक्षसम् अधिकृत्य अधुना अनुवर्तते. In our last talk, we saw how Nipunaka came with precious information for Chanakya. So he shows who are the persons who are loyal to the Nandas rather than to Chandragupta. Of them, he had pointed out, number one, Shapanaka. So actually speaking, this is another agent of Chanakya himself, and he has a big role to play as we get to know in the future acts. So, Vipupakshe Baddha Pakshapataha Kshapanakaha. So, he is very explicitly loyal to the enemy of Chandragupta Maurya, and that is to the Nandas. And secondly, there is another person by name Viśākhadatta. So, this Viśākhadatta is a Kayastha, and he is a sort of a clerk, and he is a very good friend of Amatyrakshasa. Amatyrakshasya Priyavaryasya. And Chanakya says in his Swagata, you can see that in this act, in fact, throughout the play more or less, there are a lot of Swagatas in which the speaker speaks to himself, which is to say, gives expression to the thoughts that are going on within his mind. So, which is a natural requirement in the drama. So, in any drama for that matter. So, Chanakya says, of course, to say that he is just a Kayastha is something trivial. So, one doesn't have to care too very much for a person of this standing and stature who will be loyal to the enemy. Kayastha iti laghi matra. So, it's of not much consequence, and yet even in such occasions Chanakya spells out what his policies are. He says, even if the enemy is very small and very ordinary, it's not proper to ignore him. Na yuktam prakritam api ripum avajñātam. Avajñāna is ignoring, so neglecting. It's not proper to neglect an enemy, even if he is very ordinary. And therefore, tasmin maya suhrichhadna siddharthaka vinikshitaha. And therefore, siddharthaka is there, and then this will be taken care of. And the third person is Amatyrakshasa, Amatyrakshasa's second heart, as it were, Dvitiyam Hridayam. And the fellow is staying right in Pataliputra, also called Pushpapura, and he is Manikara Shreshthi Chandanadasa Nama. That is Chandanadasa, so who is a jeweler banker, and this person is a very important person. So it is in him, with his family, that Rakshasa has deposited his family, and therefore his wife, Rakshasa's wife, and children are there with this person. And Chanakya realizes that he is the Suhrit Tama, the best friend of Amatyrakshasa. And Chanakya is able to read between the lines very well. And he says, Na hyanatma sadrisheshu rakshasaha kalatram nyasi krishyati. Now, Amatya is not a person who would leave his wife to the care of a person who is not unlike himself. So, anatma sadrisheshu, which is to say, he is like another Amatya himself, and therefore there is utmost loyalty of this Chandanadasa to Amatyrakshasa. And therefore, Chanakya pays very great importance to this factor, but makes an inquiry with Nipunaka as to how exactly he has come to know that Rakshasa has left his wife there. And the Gudachara Nipunaka says that he has got this Anguli Mudra, the royal seal, so which will make things very clear to Amatya, to Amatya Chanakya, and he offers that ring to Chanakya, and Chanakya takes that ring and reads out the name of Rakshasa there, and then he makes an exclamation to himself once again. So he says, well, Rakshasa himself has now, as it were, become attached to my fingers. Nanu vaktavyam Rakshasa eva mama anguli pranayi samruttaha iti. So, and then he says, I would like to know how exactly did you come to get the ring? So how did you acquire the ring? So once he has got this ring in hand, it is as though Amatya himself is now under his thumb. So that is the feeling that Chanakya has. That is the confidence that Chanakya brings with. And he says, the Gudachara, the spy, Nipunaka says, well, you had yourself asked me to examine the conduct of the people, so get to know who are loyal to Chandragupta and who to Dinandas. And then, for the sake of this, I naturally need to visit many houses and go to many places. And therefore, I have taken the ruse of this Yamabhata so in my hand, and I went to the house of this Manikara Shreshti Chandradasa's house, and I spread this Yamabhata there, and I was singing songs. And then they suddenly came out of the room of the house. A 5-year-old boy who was looking very attractive. So Panchavarsha Priyadarshaniya Sharira Kritihi. So, and as a small boy, naturally he was very much interested in something new that was happening there. And the moment he came out of the room, there was this cry, Ha Nirgato Nirgataha. Oh, he has come out, he has come out. And immediately he was followed by a lady, so who came to hold the child, and she scolded the child and took the child away. And in that context, in that hubbub or confusion, so there fell from her hand this ring, and this ring so went to the door sill and dashed against it and came straight to me, as it were, to my very feet. And then I took that ring into my hand and read the name of Rakshasa there, and naturally consider it very important, and I have brought this to you, and this is the way I have acquired that ring. And then Chanakya says, well, you may go now. And he also doesn't forget to tell him that he is going to be rewarded properly for his acquisition of something very important. So he goes away, and Chanakya thinks that with this, so he is able to control Amatya Rakshasa fully. And then he calls his disciple Sharangarava. We come across this name Sharangarava even in Kalidasa's Shakuntala. So the word Sharangarava means the twang of the bow. So the bows used to be made of shringas, or the horns. In fact, even in English we use the word horn itself for the musical instrument. So made of horn is made from shringa. Horn is charanga, and the sound issuing from that is Sharangarava. So Sharanga is also the bow of Vishnu. Anyhow, so Sharangarava is the name of the disciple. He calls him and he asks him to bring ink and paper, and he brings it. And Chanakya now reflects on what he should lay there. And he says his plan is to acquire control over the Rakshasa, this person Rakshasa. So with this lekha, with the writing there, So with just the signet ring of Rakshasa and this paper that he is about to write now, he says he thinks that he can take full control of Rakshasa. And then the Pratihari enters there, and she has some information from Chandragupta, namely that Chandragupta wants to perform the obsequies of Parvateshwara, who has recently been assassinated. So that was through Viśākhadatta Prayoga, as we had discussed in the last session. So he wants to do Chandragupta wants to perform the Paralaukika karmas, the obsequies of Parvateshwara. And further, he has the ornaments that Parvateshwara used to wear, and those ornaments of Parvateshwara he wants to distribute among the recipients, namely the Brahmanas, and therefore these are his plans, and he has sent a message, and this Pratihari, or portress, who has brought this information to the king, so reveals this, and Chanakya is very happy about what Chandragupta is doing. So he says, Mama hridayena saha sanmandriya sandishtavanasi. So you have thought over as I would think over these things, and say you have sent the message. So, which is to say that the thinking of Chandragupta has already fallen in line with Chanakya's. So there is no move of Chanakya that is not going to be politically advantageous, so in one way or the other. And even so here, in order to dispel the notion that that people have that Parvateshwara has got killed by Chanakya, or whatever negative impression that might have been generated. So in order to dispel that, so the due performances of ceremonies, post-mortem ceremonies regarding Parvateshwara have been taken up by Chandragupta, and he seeks a permission from Chanakya to do this. So whenever Chanakya would take some step, he would first consult Chanakya, and accordingly only he would proceed, as we have seen in the last session. Chandragupta was a Sachivayastha Siddhi minister, king, and therefore all his decisions would depend upon the consent of this great minister that he had, namely Vishnugupta or Chanakya. And Chanakya admires him, Abhigyah khalusi loka vyavaharanam. So just though Chandragupta is now come of age, and he knows the transactions of the world, the ways of the world. So he has now become an adept in that. So Abhijna means a person who is a master of something. Loka vyavahara is the way things are to be conducted in the world, so that you know very well now. So, okay, you can go ahead as you have planned. And then as regards the ornaments of Parvateshwara, so which Chandragupta wants to give away as gifts to worthy persons, to the Brahmanas, even they, Chanakya has a political calculation, and therefore we also cautions him that it must be given away to Brahmanas, no doubt, but to Gunavadhyaha eva pratipadaniya. It must be, the ornaments must be given away to only those who are meritorious, and it is to such persons, so that it must be given away and not to anybody. So in our last talk also we had discussed this issue, namely that the entire political administration is focused on these things, namely the right acquisition of riches, and then the maintenance and of the same, and enhancement of the same, and then proper distribution of wealth. So, and in that figure the distribution to the worthy recipients, and therefore, while that also forms one of the cardinal values of Arthashastra of Kautilya, so here also he says that this must be given away to worthy Brahmanas, and who those worthy Brahmanas are, I will select and send. Parikshita Gunan Brahmanan Preshiyam. So, though Brahmanas are in general highly revered in this society, so still Chanakya says that I will send the worthy Brahmanas whose merits I have myself tested. So as we can see later, so even out of this apparently very small incident, Chanakya reaps political capital and is very cautious in every one of his steps, and he sends away the Pratihari. And then Chanakya tells his disciple Chargarva to go and speak to Vishwavasu and his three brothers. So Vishwa and his two brothers. So three brothers they are totally. So the others, the brothers' names are not made plain in the play anyhow. So ask them to go and receive from Chandragupta the ornaments that he is now about to distribute, and then come and report to me. So he sends this message through the Pratihari, and she goes away. And then Chanakya has thought of some of the matter that is to be written in that letter. So he thinks of the latter half and the first half, and he has already thought of the latter half of the letter. So this shall form the latter half of my latter portion of my letter. And what should be the first portion? And then he says, well, now I got the idea. So what's the idea? There are 5 kings who are loyal to the who are all like the enemies and who are all loyal to Rakshasa. And all these 5 kings are Mlecha kings. So Mlecha Rajalokasya Madhyat Pradhanatamaha Pancha Rajanaha. So, and who are they? Number 1 is Chitravarma from the country Kuluta. Probably it refers to the Kulu Valley or the Kulu that is near Punjab. And then second one is Malay Narapati Simhanadu Nrsimha. So there is this Simhanada. He is number 2. He is a very great king no doubt. And Malaya Narapati, Malaya here does not refer to the Malaya of the Kerala. So on the other hand, it refers to some region with the same name in Nepal. There is one Malabhum in Nepal, and probably refers to that. So the geography of most of the events is in North India. And then Kashmir of Pushkaraksha. So Kashmir is being ruled by one Yavana king by name Pushkaraksha. All these are Mlechas, he says. And then there is also this Sindhushena, who belongs to that Sindh, the modern Sindh. So he's called Saindhavaha, so from the Sindh region. Meghakyaf Panchamosmin, and there is also the 5th king by name Megha, and he is a king of Parsis, Parasi Kadhirajaha. So I will write out their names, and he says, even as I list their names, may Chandragupta remove their names. May Chitragupta remove their name. Chitragupta Pramarshtu. So he must wipe out these names from the register of the world, which is to say that they are all to be put to death. How they are going to be put to death will be revealed only in a future act, and that's something very interesting. And first he thinks of writing down all these names of persons who are ill-disposed to Chandragupta and who are loyal to the Rakshasa. And upon second thoughts, he says, okay, I will not write the names of these persons. So let everything remain unclear, so obscure. As you can see, Chanakya makes very good use of ambiguity. So when you come to the 5th act, we get to know the beauty and the great political advantage out of this Patra Lekha. So this letter. So and then he writes and jots down some points and calls his disciple, and he says, even as he writes, he realizes that his own handwriting is not so very beautiful, and he generalizes and says that the handwriting of Shrotriyas is, after all, usually bad. So Shrotriyaksharani prayatna likhitanyapi. So even they write with great efforts. So niyatam asputani bhavan. They will be very bad. So much like the proverbial doctor's handwriting today. So Kshotriya's handwriting is definitely not quite so good, and therefore, so he calls, he tells his Shishya Sharagrava to call Siddharthaka. So take this matter to Viśākhadatta. So this Viśākhadatta is a kayastha, and as a businessman, his handwriting has to be very good. He has to maintain records. So his handwriting has to be extremely clear, and therefore take this content to Viśākhadatta, and then let it be that it is from somebody to somebody and without an address on the outside of the letter. So adatta bahya namanam lekham. So everything is kept ambiguous and secretive, and ultimately it is this secretive nature that's going to furnish great yields, and therefore get this written by this kayastha. And he also cautions him that it should not be told to Viśākhadatta, it should not be revealed that it is Chanakya who is getting this done. So, nacha akheyamasmai Chanakyo lekhayati, that Chanakya is behind this writing of the letter. So that person, Viśākhadatta, should not come to know. So, even by means of the handwriting of Viśākhadatta, so Chanakya is going to reap political capital out of this, because in future, in the fifth act, we see that it is because it is in the handwriting of Viśākhadatta, who is very loyal to Rakshasa, that there is much that is achieved by Chanakya. In fact, in the future act, he says that there is nothing that Chanakya will do, even in his dreams, if it is without any purpose. So, na prayojanamantara Chanakya swapnepi cheshtate. So, even in his dream, if Chanakya should act, then there is some meaning to it, and there is some purpose that is to be served by it. So that's the way Chanakya does, and the imprint of that, we see it in every act of Chanakya, and therefore do not reveal to Viśākhadatta that it is Chanakya who is getting this done, and he sends away the disciple, and he exclaims upon the exit of this disciple. So many of these things, even the disciple does not know what Chanakya is doing, so and what for he is doing. All these are not revealed to persons who are not directly, to whom this is not directly useful, and therefore everything is kept a sort of a secret, and it's only persons who are concerned and who ought to know will get to know, and not others. And even as he sends his disciple away, he says, Hanta Jito Malayaketu. So now Malayaketu has been won. Now, these were the two persons who were bothering Chanakya very much, and therefore now, even in the very first act, so it's not after a lot of developments that Chanakya is able to say that now he is getting confident that he can catch hold of Malayaketu or catch hold of Rakshasa and so on. But on the other hand, even the acquisition of this bit of information as to who are all, say, not loyal to Chandragupta, or the acquisition of the ring, etc., with these things only, so he is able to reap a great deal of political capital, and he says Malayaketu has been won. So that is to say, it's still a long way to go. We will see only in the last act, in the seventh act, that Malayaketu has he is made to come round, even as Chanakya brings Rakshasa also, he brings him also down to his own subservience. Even Malayaketu is not so. But this happens only in the last act. But even in the first act, he says that he is able to do this. So, Hanta Jito Malayaketu. So, he says that Malayaketu has already been conquered. So, and then Siddhartha has now come, getting the letter written. So, when he takes this letter to Viśākhadatta, on ground that his handwriting is good, etc., Viśākhadatta can't suspect that this is going to cause grave damage later, because it is in his handwriting. Because in the fifth act, in the sixth act, we find that it is because it is in Viśākhadatta's handwriting, which Rakshasa also recognizes that Rakshasa is now cornered very well, and lot of political conspiracy on the part of Rakshasa is assumed to be proved on the basis of this. And therefore, this becomes a tool in the hand of Viśākhadatta. And the moment the disciple gives the letter written by Viśākhadatta, Chanakya goes through that, and the first thing that impresses him is the beauty of the handwriting. Aho darshaniyani aksharani. So, and he asks his disciple to, Siddhartha himself, who has come there now, so he asks Siddhartha to seal that letter. So, anaya mudriya enam. And then he does so. Siddhartha puts the royal seal of the Rakshasa there. And therefore, with the letter written by Viśākhadatta, who is a loyal friend and a close friend of Rakshasa, whose loyalty to Rakshasa is unquestionable, and also the imprint of the royal seal of Rakshasa himself. So it is as though Rakshasa himself has drafted that letter and got written through his most loyal friend, Viśākhadatta, and therefore this entangles him in lots of difficulties later, as we will see. And then Siddhartha says, well, I put this here also, what else do I need to do? Then Chanakya says that I have a very important task for you, a very confidential task, aptajana anushteya. So I want to engage you in that. And Siddhartha is very glad, and he says, Agyapayatvaryaha dasajanena aryasya anushthatoyam. So I will be very happy to do whatever you bid. In fact, this is the chief quality of a kinkara. A kinkara or a servant is a person who often keeps asking his boss, so what next should I do? Kinkaravani. So that is the word of the kinkara, and therefore he is very happy to carry out any behest of Chanakya. Therefore, he says, please tell me, I would only be very happy to do that. And then Chanakya tells him some important things to be done. So we can see through this conversation that there is not one thing, even a small thing, that is not meant to prove ultimately politically advantageous to Chandragupta and Chanakya. So every small step that they take is going to be very useful. And he says, well, what you must do is, you must go to the place of execution, Vadhyasthana, and then the executioners there, the Ghatakas there. So go there in advance and then indicate to those executioners that when you wink at them angrily, then they must run away from executing the person to be executed. So, Sarosha Dakshinakshi Sankocha Samjna. So, winking the eye, so meaningfully. Even this winking the eye, I think I told something about this in my last talk itself, is something that can have 1,000 meanings, and in the Unicode an emoji has been developed even for this. So that is so very important, and therefore Sarosh Dakshinakshi Sankocha Samjna. So winking with the right eye and with an angry eye. So the moment you do that, the executioners should pretend that they are threatened, and therefore they themselves run away from their task of executing some fellow. Ultimately, you see that it is not the. Finally, it is as though this Viśākhadatta is to be executed and so on. But then here, the signal that is to be given, and then the executioners themselves run away, and then Viśākhadatta should be taken away from that Vadhyasthana, the spot of execution, and you must take him to Rakshasa himself. So escape, as it were, so scare those executioners and escape with this Viśākhadatta who was to be executed and take him to Rakshasa himself directly. And obviously, Rakshasa would be mightily pleased when Viśākhadatta, who is very important for him, so has been saved from execution. So by you, he will naturally give you some gifts, and then you must receive those gifts. And so we should, out of humility, one should not say, he should not, Siddhartha should not say that, no, I don't want any gift, so please leave it as it is, and so on. On the other hand, receive those gifts, because some political advantage is to be gained with even those gifts. So, and then stay along with Rakshasa. So as you can see later, when he goes to Rakshasa, taking Viśākhadatta with him, so he tells that now he has obviously earned the ire of Chandragupta and Chanakya, and therefore he can't return to Pataliputra, and therefore he would rather prefer to stay with Amatya himself. And Amatya says, yes, be with me and all that. So he gains a place of importance there, that circle, and therefore you must stay with Rakshasa for some time. And when the important moment comes, then you will be given indication, and then you will know how to act. So it is to say, till then he must not reveal his true colors, and he must remain apparently loyal to this person, Viśākhadatta, and then to Amatya, and so on, and behave as though he sides with them wholly and heartily. And that is the way you have to be there for some time. And when Amatya Rakshasa gives some gift, make it a point to receive it. Aparigraha is something that is told of a sannyasin. He must be very averse to receiving gifts from people. So, and that is also the way, for example, in the Ashtanga Yoga system, it's considered one of the 5 yamas. So, non-acquisition of things. So, multiplicity of acquisition of things is going to land one in greater and greater attachments and bondages, and therefore the less that one owns, the better for him. So the lesser will be the intensity of the bond of attachment, and therefore this aparigraha is also sometimes stated as an important virtue. And on the other hand, it is also stated that in the case of a Brahmana, parigraha is something that is very important for him. Brahmana is known as a Shadkarmi. So he has the 6 tasks of Yajana and Vyajana, himself performing sacrifices and helping others, so guiding others perform the yajna, and then Adhyayana and Adhyapana, himself studying the Vedas and guiding others in their study of the Vedas, and then Dana and Pratigraha. So he must also give away gifts, and he must also accept gifts, is also there. And therefore, here he is specifically advising Siddhartha to accept the dana that is given by Rakshasa in recompense to his saving Viśākhadatta from the gallows. So if somebody is saved from the moment of death, from the point of death, and that's a very great advantage. It's a new life bestowed upon him, and therefore Rakshasa will be mightily pleased with that, and therefore do accept the gifts given by him and do continue to stay with him. So you have some tasks there to be achieved. We can see how a good many of the people who are very close to Rakshasa and some of the key persons on that side are all Chandragupta's spies ultimately, and they know when to let them down. And ultimately, in a way, Chanakya achieves a sort of a bloodless coup. So that is what is most important here. So apparently he gets a few persons killed. So as you can see that even Sarvartha Siddhi was not spared, the uncle of the elder brother of the Nanda. So he was not spared, and there are a few kings, these Mleccha kings who are gotten to be killed by various ways. So, in spite of achieving all this, an outright warfare that was planned to be declared, and that would ensue the slaughter of so many people on both sides. So all those things are averted, and it's only on account of the intelligence of Chanakya that with very minimum deaths, this whole thing is achieved, namely the people on the Rakshasa side, Malayaketu and others, they are given a crushing defeat without any declaration of warfare. And ultimately, Rakshasa is made to become the minister of Chandragupta. That is what is achieved in the last act. And all this is done by Chanakya. So with the minimum number of deaths that can be possible. And therefore, he ensures that no real warfare takes place, although preparations were going on indeed on the side of Malayaketu to wage a war against Chandragupta. So all this is averted. And then he has given some indication to Siddharthaka, so to do these things, namely accept the gifts given by Rakshasa and stay with him. And further, he also whispers some secret into the ear of Siddharthaka. So even which the audience is not supposed to know, and therefore we know that there are some more plans afoot, and we are kept in suspense regarding that, and we will get to know only by and by. So post fifth act, we will get to know some of those things. And then he calls Sharangarava, and he says, tell these two important police officers, they are named Kalapashika and Dandapashika, so very good names. So Kala is Yama and Kalapasha is Yama's Pasha, and then Dandapashika, so this fellow has both Danda and Pasha in his hand. So these two persons have to be informed that Chandragupta is issuing this command. So it's as though Chanakya can issue orders in the name of Chandragupta regularly, and therefore, namely, this Kshapanaka, that is Jivasiddhi, it is this fellow who has put to death Parvataka, King Parvataka, through the Viśākhadata that we discussed in the last session. So, Viśākhadata Parvatakam Ghatitawan. It is he who has killed Parvataka. So, and therefore, did proclaim that for this crime of his, he is now going to be banished from the kingdom. So, with all the due contempt, so publicly proclaim the misdeed done by this fellow, the crime that he has done, and then with disgrace he must be sent away. Sanikaram Nagarat Nirvasetam. So this is the proclamation that is to be made, and then the Shishya goes away. So in a way, it is this that gives some message to the public also as to what are the things that are happening. In the absence of newspapers and the social media, so obviously the public, if the public is to get to know the developments, there must be some public declaration and proclamation, and so this is what is to be done, and therefore he must be handled thus. And then he says further, this Shakatadasa, so he is constantly trying to attack us, so attack our very person, and therefore Chariram Abhidrogdhum Prayasate. So he is all set to attack us physically. He is only biding his time, and his crime also should be proclaimed, and then he must be put to death. So he must be taken to the gallows, and his family should be put into the jail. So all these things have to be done. So this has to be informed to the police officers and the Shishya exit. And then Chanakya is just in thinking that how I wish that I will be able to really capture Rakshasa. So, and Siddhartha says, well, sir, captured. So it is as though an answer to Chanakya's thought. So it's actually his Swagata. But then there is a good signal from the words of Siddhartha saying, captured. What is captured is Grihitahas. So the Adi Sandesha, the message that is given by Chanakya has been received by him very well. The word Grihita means both captured and received. And therefore, that forebodes something good for Chanakya. He was just thinking of capturing Rakshasa, and the word Grihitaha from the mouth of his disciple Siddhartha so indicates to him, as it were, Hanta Grihitaha Rakshasa. So it's as though Rakshasa himself has been captured. So, and he asks what has been Grihita, and he says Adi Sandesha has been Grihita, and then the Shishya Siddhartha accepts, and he has in his hand now the lekha, the letter, along with the royal seal, with the Rakshasa seal. So, Astute Kari Siddhi. So, Chanakya blesses him and he goes away. And then the Shishya comes and reports and tells him that Kalapashka and Dandapashka have been informed of the command given by Chanakya, and that they are going to implement the order of Chandragupta. And then he says, I want to see now Chandanadasa. So this is the most important episode in this act. And Chandanadasa comes. So the Shishya brings Chandanadasa, and the two come together. And Chandanadasa's monologue, so he tells himself, when Chanakya summons somebody, well, then it is surely something to be worried about. And in the case of even a person who has committed no blunder, he has to get worried if Chanakya has sent for him. So, Nirdoshasya api shanka. And then, well, I have made my mistakes, and naturally I have to be afraid. Of course, this Chandanadasa, who has shielded the family of Rakshasa, and therefore he was only expecting trouble from Chanakya. And the moment Chanakya sends words for Viśākhadatta, for Chandanadasa, Chandanadasa knows that there is some problem ahead. And then it is as though Chandanadasa was even looking forward to this moment, in the sense that he knew that something would happen, that Chanakya would get to know what he has been doing, and Chanakya has a big network of spies, and you get to know that the Rakshasa family is there with him, and therefore he must be very careful, and he must take care of the Rakshasa family, and therefore he had informed Dhanasena, so his friend, so Dhanasena and others, so who were there in his house. So any moment Chanakya get my house searched, and therefore be on your guard and take away the family of Rakshasa. And as for me, I am prepared to face whatever consequence, and therefore take care of the family of Rakshasa. This is the instruction he has given to Dhanasena. So he knew that some such thing is going to happen, that Chanakya may get his house searched and the Rakshasa family may be located therein, and therefore he'll be charged with that crime of supporting the enemies, and therefore he may face problems. So therefore he has made all those arrangements. So this is what he says in his monologue, so in his Swagata. So before he faces Chanakya, the Shishya takes him to Chanakya, and then Chanakya says, Swagatam idam asanam asitam, please take this seat. And Chandanadasa says, sir, don't you know that if some undue courtesy is offered, that makes one very embarrassed and that actually causes sorrow. So, anuchitaha upacharaha hridayasya paribhavadapi mahad dukkham utpadi. A greater sorrow is generated than while actually insulting a person. So, therefore, I would rather like to sit down on the ground, and therefore he sits down on the ground, but then Chanakya doesn't allow him. So, yes, we had expected this of you, this behavior, but please sit down on the seat. So, Chandanadasa easily suspects that this man has some plans, so which is why he is showing great courtesy. Upakshiptam anena dushtena kimap. So this Dushta Chanakya has some plans, and that's why he is so very courteous to me. So Hidari Ajñapayati, as the command sir, and he sits on the seat. So he knows that he can't afford to violate the orders of Chanakya, even though when a request comes from a superior, it's equivalent in order, and therefore he has to sit on the seat shown by Chanakya. There is a saying in one of the plays of Kalidasa. It says that if the husband shows extraordinary courtesy to his wife, it may perhaps mean that his love is transferred to another woman. Anyasankranta premanaha nagarikaha dakshinaha bhavanti, says Kalidasa. So even so, if Chanakya is showing very high regard to this person, Chandanadasa, who is after all loyal to the enemy, it must mean that there is something here. And Chanakya asks him, how is this business growing? So, api prachiyante samvyavaharanam vradhilabha. So, hope you are having a very good thriving business. And it is then that Chandanadasa says, Atyadaraha shankaniyaha, to himself. So, if a person shows extraordinary courtesy, then you must definitely suspect that something very dangerous is going to be there. So Chanakya is only talking business, but then Chandanadasa is to suspect there. And then he says, sir, out of your grace, everything is going on fine, and my business is uninterrupted. And then Chanakya asked him, I just wanted to know whether the demerits of Chandragupta are not reminding people of the merits of the Nanda kings. So, and then Chandanadasa says, Karno Pidhaya Shantam Papam. This is Shantam Papam. Evil be averted. No such thing whatsoever. So, Chandragupta is like Sharat Chandra. So, he is like the autumnal moon. So, just as that autumnal moon is very, very pleasant, because after the passage of the rainy season, in the autumnal season, the moon will be very pleasant. So, unlike the present situation in Madras or in much of South India, so even after the passage of the rainy season, so now the sky will be very clear of the clouds, say, during the autumnal season, and therefore the moon will look very pleasant there. And then Chanakya, the intelligent way in which he takes the conversation to the essential point. So there is not a single unnecessary word that Chanakya speaks, and he makes it all very useful to his own tasks and goals. And then he says, well, I hope you can easily understand that when citizens are very pleased with the king, then the king also expects something from the people. So, pratipriyam icchanti rajanaha. So, as a countermeasure, so on their part, people must do something for the king also when they are so happy with the king. So, Chandanadasa immediately says, okay, sir, please tell me how much should I pay and where should I remain, or some such thing. So, king kiyate, so what should I give and how much? So obviously all in terms of money. So he is after all a jeweler banker, and he's having big business, and he easily suspects that Chanakya is expecting some payment of money from him. So on whatever ground. So and if that should solve the problem, so much the better, and therefore he's ready to make any payment. And then Chandragupta, Chanakya reminds him, dear Chandradasa, this is not Chandragupta's kingdom, this is Nanda's kingdom. So Chandragupta Rajyam idam, na Nanda Rajyam. So because King Nanda was after all after money, so Artharuchi he was, so he would be very fond of acquiring more and more riches. And it is only such with such people that you can make gifts of money and then please them. So artha ruchehe artha sambandha pritim utpadayati. But that's not the case with Chandragupta. Chandragupta wants that you must be free from all trouble. So, and then Chandradasa says, so actually Chandradasa could have suspected that even these words of Chanakya are loaded. But he intelligently says, yes, sir, I fully agree, and keeps quiet. Ayanugrihi. And then Chanakya says, he spells out what exactly he meant. Well, Mr. Chandradasa, you didn't ask me how exactly would people like you be free from trouble. Apariklesha is being free from trouble. So how can people like you be free from trouble is something that you should have asked and you didn't ask. Chandradasa says, so please, perhaps, sir. So bid me and I will do that. And then he says, let me put it in a nutshell. And that is by your behavior, which in no way should be inimical to the king. So, Rajani aviruddhabhihi vrittibhihi. So it's only through such means that you can be free from trouble. And Chandradasa says, who is the stupid fellow who can dare oppose or do something counter to the interests of the king? So, and Chanakya is very blunt in saying, yourself, you are the first in the list. So, Bhavanayavata Prathamam. So, first and foremost of all, you stand in that list. So, Chandradasa, so he again says, Shantam Papam, so he will be averted. So, and he also says, I am like a bit of grass and you are like fire. So, or the king is like fire. Kidrishaha Trinanam Agnina Saha Virodha. So, how can grass offend or go counter to fire? So, it will be burned in a moment. So, Chanakya spells out what is the Virodha. So, and he comes to the point very directly. Mr. Chandradasa, you are sheltering the family of Rakshasa. And this person is Rajapatyakaran. He is a person who is doing something offensive to the king. And you are sheltering the family of Rakshasa in your house. Chandradasa plainly denies that. Alikumetadu. Sir, this is plain falsehood. So I think somebody who is not knowledgeable must have given such a complaint to you. So that's not the case. And then Chanakya says, well, you don't have to defend yourself like that. See, it's only understandable that persons belonging to the previous regime, when they have to run away from the city, then even though, even if they do not like, they have to place their family members in someone whom they trust and then get away from the country. And now, considering that, so even if you had not liked the proposal, so even if that is the case, so considering that would be a crime on your part, dosham utpadit. And Chandradasa says, well, sir, as you said, it is true that at that moment of his Rakshasas getting away from the country, he had deposited his family with me. So that is the truth. So evam nidam. So he says it was the case. Asit. So and Chanakya immediately captures him, saying, first you said alikam, this total falsehood, and now you say asit. So iti paraspara virodhini vachane, the two are contradictory. So he catches him there. And then Chandradasa admits that he defrauded him to a small extent, though. So this is the Vakchala or prevarication. It's only to this extent, sir, that I did conceal something of the truth. And then he says, when Chandragupta is the king, Chanakya says, the citizens are not to involve themselves in such frauds, and therefore plainly surrender the family of Rakshasa immediately, and should be free from all sorts of fraud. And then Chandanadasa says, well, sir, they are not there now with me. Where are they then? Chandanadasa says, I do not know. Chanakya says, with a smile, Shirasi bhayam atidure tat pratikaraha. So the problem is right at hand now, and the solution is far away. And Chanakya says, don't think ever that just as Chanakya did to the Nandas, so Nandamiva Vishnu Guptaha. So Ityardhokte Lajjam Natayitva says the text. So even while Chanakya says those words, he is himself overcome by a sense of shame, as it were, as he is, as it were, bragging about himself. He says, never ever think that Amatya Rakshasa is going to do to Chandragupta what Vishnugupta did to the Nandas. So it is just not the case that the Amatya Rakshasa is going to uproot the Nandas. So, of course, the Nandas had great ministers like Vakranasa, and of course, even this Rakshasa was there, and still the royal glory, or Adi Lakshmi, could not be saved by them. And that is not the case here in the case of Chandragupta, and the valor of Chanakya is all very well known. And then by that time, as very well planned by Chandragupta, by Chanakya, there is a lot of noise that is heard from behind the screen, and he asks his disciple Charangarava to go and find out what it is. And he comes and reports that Kshapanaka Jivasiddhi, so he is being banished, so as per the orders of the king. And Chanakya makes use of the same and conveys the message to Chandranadasa, saying that this is the kind of punishment that is meted out to people who go against the wishes of the king. And Chandranadasa again says, well, sir, the family of the Rakshasa is not with me. And then once more there is this hubbub created and behind the screen, and Chanakya orders his disciple to go and find out what it is, and he comes and reports saying that Viśākhadatta is now about to be hanged at the stakes. So because he went counter to the king, and therefore Raja Apathyakari, and therefore he is about to be hanged now. And then Chanakya takes this also as an important message to Chandanadasa, saying that those who go counter to the interests of the king will never be tolerated and will be put to severe punishment. And then, therefore, immediately do what you must do. And then it's only by surrendering the Rakshasa family that you can protect yourself and your own family. And Chandradasa says, are you going to threaten me? Okay, even if Rakshasa family were to be there in my house, I would not have surrendered. And how can I surrender those who are not with me? And it is this that makes Chanakya admire Chandanadasa. So, though he asks him threateningly, Yeshate Nishchayaha, is this your final decision? So, even though he asks that question and Chandanadasa answers in the affirmative, Chanakya says, Sadhu Chandanadasa, because in trying circumstances, people would often be drawn towards where they can get more money, and it's only a person like you who is like Shibi, so who can make the greatest of sacrifices. So we have all heard of Shibi, who made a very great sacrifice, and therefore it's only a person like this that can speak like this and has this resolve. And then the moment Chandranadasa still does not budge from his stand, Chanakya is very angry towards him and says, Duratman, Dushtavanik, you wicked businessmen, you are going to suffer, and ask his disciple Charangarava to inform Kalapashika and Dandapashika that this person must be arrested. So, and then he revises his thought and says, tell Mr. Vijayapala, the person who takes care of the fort, Durgapalaha, Vijayapalaha, so to arrest this fellow along with his family, to confiscate all his possessions and then arrest him and jail these people. So Shishya says yes and goes away, and then Chandranadasa thinks that his end has come, and still he says, Tishtya mitrakaryena me vinashaha na purushdoshena. So it's not that I have personally committed some crime that I am deserving his death, but on the other hand, it's for the sake of my friend, that the sacrifice for the sake of my friend, so it is putting me into this difficulty, and I am prepared to face this situation. And Chanakya is actually, the moment the Shishya takes this Chandranadasa away, Chanakya is actually very happy and says, Labdha idanim Rakshasa. Now I have got Rakshasa. And the logic of Chanakya is that if this person is prepared to sacrifice his very life for the sake of Rakshasa, then obviously Rakshasa himself would be ready to sacrifice his own life for the sake of this fellow. And therefore, holding to ransom this fellow's life, I can get Rakshasa, come to rescue him. So, Asya apadi pranaha nunam tasya apina priyaha. So even Rakshasa would be able to be ready to give away his life for the sake of this Chandranadasa. So I'll take just 5 more minutes so that this first act is completed. And then the Shishya comes in and reports some noise behind the screen and says that Sir Siddharthaka, so who was actually the disciple of Chanakya, so he has gone to the Vadyabhumi and scared away the executioners and relieved Viśākhadatta, and actually has run away with him. And Chanakya is all appreciation for him inwardly, and outwardly asks him, oh, has this happened? Ask Bhagurayana to go and manage their affairs. And Shishya goes out and comes back saying, Sir, Bhagurayana has also run away. And then Chanakya says, well, it's a good signs. And then, okay, go and inform these people, Mr. Bhadrabhata, Purushadatta, Dingarata, Balagupta, Rajasena, Rohitaksha, and Vijayavarman, these 7 people, to do the needful, so and go and capture Bhagurayana. And Shishya goes out and then comes back and says, Sir, all these have left the city right in the morning. So, and then Chanakya blesses them all inwardly, but outwardly says, okay, do not bother Shishya. So because whoever wants to go away in order to gain whatever they want, let them all go away. So let everybody go away, but then let not my intellect go away. So Buddhistu Magan Mama, because it is Senashatebhyo Dhika. So it is more than 100 armies. There is a beautiful saying in the Mahabharata, Yekam Hanya Nahanya Navahanya Dishur Mukto Dhanushmata. The arrow shot by an excellent archer may kill a person or may not kill a person. But on the other hand, Buddhimata Utsrishta Hanyat Hanti Rashtram Sanayakam. But the intelligence of an intelligent man can indeed bring to death. So the entire country or destroy a country along with the king. So and then with these words, the first act comes to a conclusion with the firm confidence of Chanakya in his own intellect, because it's all with the intellect that he achieves the things that he needs to achieve. As I said, the takeaway of the whole play is the brilliance of Chanakya and the goodness of the heart of Rakshasa. So in the next session, we will deal with the second act. Sarvebhyah namaskara.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the wonderful lecture on Mudrarakshasa. If anyone is having any questions, they can unmute their mic and ask the questions, or they can just write it in the chat box.
In the recent times, is there a place where, has anybody attempted to actually enact it in Sanskrit? This entire play? Do you know of anything?
This play was enacted.
Yeah.
I think there have been some enactments of this play. Anyhow, the Westerners have taken a great fancy to this play because it's full of the dramatic content of this play is extraordinary, and therefore, and further there are no female characters in this play, and that makes it very easy to handle. At least it used to. There's one question here: did Chanakya always consult with the king before ordering serious punishment to the guilty? For example, order for killing Viśākhadatta, sending Jews to the other country, etc. That's not the case. So, as we spoke of Chandragupta as Sachivayatta Siddhi, which both Chandragupta knows and Chanakya knows, that a good many of the decisions of Chandragupta were taken by Chanakya himself. And Chanakya was also ensuring that Chandragupta would himself grow up and would be able to take his own decisions. But when it came to certain crucial things, Chanakya would himself take the decision. But generally, he would also immediately keep Chandragupta informed of the same and even the logic of the same. So, therefore, there could be no disheartenment on the part of Chandragupta that Chanakya took some decision without consulting him and so on. It's only the third act that we find that there is a quarrel between Chandragupta and Chanakya, and even that is a pretended quarrel between the two. And Chanakya himself had arranged for that quarrel because that there was some difference of opinion between Chandragupta and Chanakya, and that Chandragupta was angry with Chanakya, had to be conveyed to the enemy camp, who would depend on that to plan some of the things, and which plans could be easily foreseen by Chanakya. For Chanakya, advance information is always sufficient to have a proper armor against the consequences, and therefore it is something like to be forewarned is to be forearmed, as they say, and therefore Chanakya could easily see what is going to happen next. So if this was the belief that was conveyed to the enemy camp and so on, and even there, the third act, as you will see later, that even when it is a Kapata Kalaha, Chandragupta feels very embarrassed at the end, at the exit of Chanakya. He actually dismisses Chanakya from his ministership. So, and after the exit of Chanakya with angry words, Chanakya says, all this was just an enactment to convey some kind of message to the enemy camp, and yet I feel very embarrassed to have insulted Chanakya, even though it was upon his own instruction that I did this. And therefore, Chandragupta trusted Chanakya's wisdom very, very much, and he also knew that Chandragupta would not go against Dharma, and it is this that made him respect him. So it's not merely that the two worked hand in hand with some selfish gain in mind. So as you can see later, Chanakya himself dwelt in a very humble abode. He lived in a hut virtually, in spite of being the minister of Chandragupta. So where he could have very easily commanded a lot of riches and lived a luxurious life, he never chose to do that. On the other hand, he lived in a very frugal manner and lived an utterly simple life, and he was an utter nispruha. And it is for these reasons that Chandragupta could trust Chanakya on almost every issue. So usually what happens is, once Chanakya's main goals or important goals are achieved with the help of Chandragupta, or Chandragupta's or Chanakya's goals are achieved via Chandragupta, then the two become somewhat independent, and the two would not like interference from the other party, each from the other. So that is what Rakshasa had expected, and that's what Chandragupta, Chanakya also planned to convey the impression of. and he makes use of even this psychology of Rakshasa. And this way, Chanakya would always consult with Chandragupta would always consult Chanakya, and Chanakya, it was not necessary for Chanakya to always consult with Chandragupta, and he knew when to inform Chandragupta, how to inform Chandragupta, and so on.
Thank you very much, madam. Thank you, sir. So, any other questions? So, I think there are no questions. So, we'll be winding up this session. So, the next session will be on next week, or we'll be mailing it regarding that soon. Thank you everyone.
Namaskar.
Namaste.